Hello. Right, I gotta turn down this music. It's a little too intense for me right now. So today we're going to focus on building some artwork after some practice with some reference drawing of the human body of some sort. I'm thinking maybe we'll focus on a skeleton at this point. Hey, Husky. So yeah, I mean, this is something that I often go through with my students. Let's just get to stream mode here. Practice can be super boring if we're not. If sometimes we don't have any reason for it and any sort of project maybe in mind for it. It can feel maybe a little bit arbitrary to be practicing. Of course, it's always good to practice. But there can be ways to prompt you to want to do that more often, right? Which is the habit you want to form. So we're going to look at kind of just getting warmed up by drawing some reference imagery, and then we can translate that into something in the latter half of the stream. So we will get to it here. Okay. I'm just going to open up some reference of skeletons. So, I mean, if you're following along, then, Google skeleton. What did I Google? Just skeleton. And keep an eye out for skeletons that seem legitimate. I mean, there's little kind of toy skeletons that are just, injection molded plastic kind of generalizations of it. So don't use that stuff. Don't use that stuff. So it's just not going to be a good time. Hey Blake, welcome. Welcome. Okay. Let us get into it. So I'm using my old Cintiq 21 as I had my Cintiq 22 die on me. So I ordered a new power bar. Try and remedy that. I actually like the Cintiq 21 a lot more for the screen. The parallax isn't too bad on it. I mean, as long as you calibrate it well. It's just that the drivers are a pain to get to work because it's such an old setup. But I managed to get it going, so I'm pretty happy about that. And I was using my little Cintiq, or not my Cintiq, but the tablet pen and touch. It's my little lifesaver if I take it traveling or anything like that. It's good to kind of pack away. Yeah, so I'm happy to not be hunched over this and trying to think about drawing on a tablet, translating that to screen. It's just not what I'm used to, so happy times. So to get started, I'm just gonna get into it here. Let's open up our skeleton guy, and I'm just gonna start on a different layer. I'm just gonna kind of start sketching things like the rib cage, right? Kind of thinking about just maybe the general shape. Key with this stuff is to kind of warm up, not get too into beating yourself up over whether or not it looks super representative. First question, do you know how to draw mechs or mecha? If so, can you give you tips on how to draw and design them? That's a huge question, and not really the stream for it, but I can talk a little bit about it. I mean, mechs specifically are not anything so well. How can I put this? mechs are they're props in a way, right? So just like you would draw a car, a truck, an APC, a tank, a helicopter, a plane, right? A mech is just a different build of that. Okay. So with those kinds of objects, what you really want to focus on, say if we're talking about life drawing, for instance, is go and draw a lot of cars and tanks and hard surface items that you can use as reference for your mechs, right? Because a mech can really, I mean, the cool thing about different mech designs is they can look so different, right? If you're looking at something like Gundam or Armored Core or Mech Warrior, there's a lot of variation in there. Titanfall, right? And I mean, it tends towards anthropomorphic shapes, so a human body, for instance, right? So let me just put my tasty coffee down. Just turn this layer off. Try another one. So with a mech, you know, you're thinking about kind of having a head and a body of sorts, right, or a torso into some sort of leg setup, right? Now the proportions of things can be wildly different, and even mechs can start to look very anthropomorphic or human-like, right? Which is going to be a little bit of a difference between drawing a tank and drawing a human. You'd kind of maybe spend some time drawing both of those things, and instead of drawing soft human tissue, you would draw kind of plated, formed steel instead of skin, right? But the forms of the human skull, if you're being very beholden to anthropomorphic sort of proportions, then that's what you'd have to look out for. On the flip side, if you're thinking kind of Mech Warrior, like, or even a lot of the Titanfall stuff, you know, you're going to be referencing tanks and things that, you know, a pilot can sit inside of, that the surfaces can take hits from rockets and machine gun fire and lasers, right? And so a lot of the technology for tanks, for instance, because they are expected to take fire, is a good place to look for the way the armor's angled so that the rounds bounce off, that kind of thing, right? And just the overall sort of shape language of the big, heavy, plated kind of containers for people. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot to think about, but if you wanted to kind of get a jump start on getting better at drawing something like a mech or any kind of robot, android, that kind of thing, then this music is ridiculous. I don't know whose this is. Not listening to that though. There we go. That's a good place to start, right? But you do have to kind of get a feel for actually drawing those forms, rendering those forms. So I would at least start there. Yeah. You don't hear the music? It's probably have it turned down quite a bit because it's a little bit obnoxious in my ears. I have it tuned down a little bit on the stream for you guys. Well, actually, I'll lower that and I'll up the desktop audio a little bit. Just let me know if that's too loud or if you can even hear it at all. Hey, Nate. Okay, so let's get back to drawing the old skeleton. So I'm drawing the rib cage here, and something that I'm, you know, you're trying to be aware of what you're doing at this point, right? You can sketch without paying much attention. You kind of make marks, and you can look up at your reference imagery and kind of go back to your artwork and sort of ignore what you saw and just kind of be inspired, I guess, by what you see. And that's not bad because at least you're kind of drawing, but at the same time you want to be taking a look at the positive and negative spaces between, say, we're building the ribs. You want to think about those negative spaces maybe in between the ribs and what shapes they make, right? Making sure that they all feel uniform. And 3, 4, 5. We can kind of take a look at that. There's sort of 5 gaps in between the ribs before the floating ribs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be all of my 5 gaps. So I'd know that. Let's just back it up a little bit here. I know that I'd have to make those ribs a little bit bigger in there. Something like that. And then we have them curving up into the spine at the back there, right? So we can kind of just start playing with that. And we have 4 gaps in the floating ribs. And then we have 2 floating ribs at the back, which in this view I'm not going to be able to see that well. So kind of get that going there, and then we'd see these 2 floating ribs kind of come out that way. So just getting a sense of that stuff. Taking a look at that clavicle up in there. So what I'm doing is I'm just erasing it, right? I mean, you can be, I guess, sentimental about your drawings if you want. Personally, and this doesn't go for everybody, but personally, I don't really want to keep PSD upon PSD of my sketch work, right? For me, it's just the physical practice that's working well. And then hopefully, you know, at some point later, I'm going to translate that into an actual illustration, right? So that's what I'm doing there. I like all the Gundam style too, all those types of stuff. Yeah, I mean, obviously reference and you can mimic. I mean, everybody does. They mimic their favorite art and make fan art, that kind of thing. But say in the course in CG Spectrum, I do push my students away from fan art, at least in over the course of the program, just because when you're doing fan art, you're not using a lot of your design sense, or you're not flexing or exercising your design sense. You're basically taking what somebody else made and you're remaking it maybe in your own style or just in your own pose, that kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, sometimes it's really fun to kind of pay homage to your favorite artists, your favorite IPs and design styles and that kind of thing. So, but a big part of being a concept artist, for instance, in Illustrator is a sense of design, right? You can't really just rip things off. I mean, I say that, but there's a ton of derivative work out there, and so you can be successful doing it, but you know, somebody wanted to go hire you to do something and they can kind of detect that you don't have a sense of your own design or a sense of design at all. That might be a little bit of a red flag for them if all they see is derivative artwork in there. Do you guys do critiques on stream? Not yet. It might be something in the future. I mean, part of the reason we do this, obviously, is to prompt students to check out the school. So we'd have to decide, sort of, if we're going to do critiques. I feel like that might be something that we might offer in the future, just so people can get a taste of what it's like working with the school. Could be fun. Okay, let's go check out our skeleton again. So let's get a front view of the old rib cage in here. So the reason why I'm kind of focusing on the rib cage is so that I get familiar with it, right? One of the things that can be overwhelming with art production is the amount of different things that we have to remember and practice, that kind of thing. And so you don't want to overwhelm yourself with trying to draw everything, trying to learn everything. So it can be good to just focus on some element that you want to kind of get a handle on, right? So maybe you spend a week just focusing on the hands or even the fingertips, right, of each finger. See what those things look like, and kind of get in there and play around with that stuff. So we got some ribs at the top here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ribs from there. So kind of getting a vibe for the way these things are crossing over the body. Sort of a little bump in the top of the ribs, and then they kind of settle down in here. One, two, three. It's interesting, like how many ribs are actually not attached directly to the sternum. It's quite a few. Quite a few. You've already attended the 3D modeling course. Awesome. Hopefully it was insightful for you. We do get a lot of cross-pollination from people that want to learn 3D and concept. Game designers that want to kind of build their own game will come through concept and go through 3D if they've interested in kind of building everything themselves. Sort of seems like an insurmountable sort of task to me, but hey, to each their own. But yeah, it's good to hear people are checking out the different programs. So we're gonna get this going on the other side as well, kind of just paying attention to where all those other guys go. You'll see sometimes on some people that are very say, let's say, lean. They can have this sternum bone, especially up at the top section here, really stick out from their chest. And you can, if they're lean enough, you can really start to see the bone structure underneath, which is pretty interesting. Some people it really protrudes. Just kind of depends on how the skeleton formed, I suppose. It's always interesting. It's good to check that stuff out when you see that. I mean, obviously don't stare at people, right? But no, it's a good way of kind of learning by just looking, right? Kind of get that spine back there. The human spine, especially into the lumbar spine at the back, can get really kind of big, meaty. Got a couple of floating ribs in that view. So I have one down here. Clavicle. That's sort of this little kind of well of the neck is where the sternocleidomastoids will kind of point to, the sort of big muscles on your neck there. So it's always good to kind of know where that is. Know it's there, right? One of my recent classes, we were dealing with some anatomy, some basic anatomy instruction, and you know, a lot of the times when people get anatomy wrong, it's because they're not aware of, or they're not paying attention to, the fact that there has to be some sort of underlying structure, right? And then what happens is the artist just generalizes that stuff, and it looks like it's made up. You know, a lot of other humans, I mean, most of us stare in some way, shape, or form at other humans every day, all day, right? Storytelling, if you're watching Netflix or playing video games, like representations of humans in the real life. Imagine that. You look and talk to people, and you know when things are looking right and when they're looking off or weird. Maybe you don't articulate it, but it can be something that catches you. Yeah, so primarily love the modeling, although personally translated more into wanting to paint later on. So I'm strongly considering doing the illustration course. Awesome, yeah. The Eric, who's built the illustration content, is awesome, and he actually streams on Fridays, so you should check out the schedule and hit him up on the stream, because you can ask him some questions as well if you haven't already. Plan on taking 3D modeling, concept art, and game design. Wow. I'm still thinking about the VFX course because I have a passion for both film and video games. That's pretty cool. Is that 80s music? Yeah, it's Harris Heller makes a whole bunch of music for streams, and it's from his album Renegade, if you're interested. Hey, I'm good. Did you miss much? The start of the stream? We're looking at drawing the human body and maybe translating that into design later. Well, we are going to translate that into design later. So just kind of taking a look at that rib cage. I mean, for me, the rib cage is a little bit wide now that I'm looking at it, right? So I could opt to maybe slim that down by the outside edge right about here, right? So no big deal though, right? Because we're kind of just playing around with some of the shapes and starting to look at how the structures come together, starting to become aware of the body. So let's take a look at the back of the old skelly. I find a lot of people have gone through and modeled skeletons over and over and over again, so there's a lot of good stuff out there. Maybe some stuff that's not completely accurate. Use your judgment. See what feels reasonable in there. Kind of just get some of the back in here, and that shoulder blade on one side of the spine. It's always interesting to look at the rib cage for me personally. It's always this like thing that keeps our organs safe-ish. As long as you don't smash those ribs. Drawn from reference. Let's get in there and get those ribs. Ribs kind of really diving off and moving down the side in here, right? Ribs are going to be a good indicator, like a contour that helps us understand sort of the volume of the form of that part of the body. So it's always good to kind of think about that when you're drawing in general. If you can supply some sense of a contour, then that can help people in 2D understand what the heck you're going for. Let's get a little bit of an eraser going in the middle of that. The spine, 7th cervical vertebrae at the top there. You'll usually notice this bump at the top of the rib cage. That's your 7th cervical vertebrae. You can probably feel it. It's one that protrudes quite a bit on the back there. That's feeling not too bad. Get the chromium process up top there, and then the humerus kind of coming off of that on both sides. You even start to incorporate the pelvis in here. And we can keep this kind of fairly loose in here for now, right? You can slowly warm up to paying attention to the specific kind of details of the body as you go. Start a new layer there. We'll get into drawing the skull a little bit here. Good to kind of block it out. Leave enough room in there for parts to be connected. You plan on making video games, film, sci-fi, horror, and action. I have just a hard time picking which class to choose from, which category. Yeah, I mean, they're all fun to design for sure. Well, for me anyway. I tend probably towards horror, I guess, if I were to pick one, but I really like fantasy and sci-fi as well, so it is a toss-up. Sometimes it's good to just pick and challenge yourself with one, right? We have went with an 80s theme rather than a funeral music this time. What made you change? This is not my music, really. This is just streamable music where Twitch won't ban the channel. Right, it's very, very dicey to be playing music that's not yours when streaming, so you gotta watch out for that stuff. Want to be the one to create worlds, environments, characters, vehicles, weapons, creatures, monsters, giants, mechs, etc. Want to tell a story. That's awesome. I mean, that's definitely, you're in the right direction, I think, to be able to do that. It's just practice at that point, right? Get in there and draw some teeth. attention to the tooth distribution there. Even with just sort of like this rough brush, I can rough that stuff in for now, right? Watching where things go, kind of rough some of this stuff out in here. Get that gap in behind the jaw there. Probably opt to make a bit more room in the back of the jaw. So today we'll probably, just to stick with the skeleton theme, maybe we'll do something of like a skeleton found in a cave clutching something a la Indiana Jones-ish kind of vibe, or Drake's Fortune kind of vibe. We could do something sci-fi. Maybe a crew member that's perished in some sort of disaster. Think of many different films and different kind of themes where that kind of stuff happens. Kind of sense that brow in there. Pretty chill. Sounds like concept art is what you really like to do. Iterative creative process. Yeah, it's probably my favorite thing as well. It's, I wanted to be an animator when I was a kid. I thought I did anyway, just because I liked animations. But the whole idea of drawing things over and over, and that was an era where traditional animation was the thing, not 3D. I just found out about concept art and went that way, because I'd rather design. Think about 3D modeling and concept art would fit me, but I also think I should take the game design. Yeah, I mean, if you want to make games, it's really important to kind of know what like game theory is, and delve deeper into that stuff, because I think a lot of people figure out how to use something like Unreal or Unity, and they get to making a game, and what they end up falling back on is just being derivative of other gameplay styles and directions, instead of really kind of understanding how to use the tools to make their own experience, right? That's how you get something like Flappy Bird. But hey, that was successful, oddly, for the brief hint that was around. But yeah, I'd say that's probably pretty good for you. Evil Dead, yeah. Yeah, check it out if you guys like any of this music. It's Harris Heller. It's not really my vibe, but works for the stream. It's non-offensive for the most part. Kind of some of that chin in there. Thinking about the kind of contour on this guy. Kind of get into drawing some hands in here as well, maybe just get more familiar. And this is the thing, when you're doing this kind of stuff, it's not like you're spending an hour or whatever, however long you're going to sit down to sketch, and you're going to lock all of that stuff in the memory, right? It's going to be kind of time and time again, that reinforcing. of things that will have you kind of draw on the recall faster, because it won't be so foggy, right? So let's kind of map out the space for that hand. Knowing how many bones are in the thumb, for instance, is probably a pretty good thing to learn. And if you're ever interested in, some good books for how to draw, and old school illustrator Andrew Loomis, classic. Some people love him, some people, whatever. Maybe not big fans of him, but I find he's a pretty good resource. But just in terms of, say, knowing what the names of the bones are in the hand, someone like Loomis didn't really believe in necessarily having to know the names, of trying to find the reason why that would be useful. It's more about kind of knowing where these things are, right? And what their shapes are, so you can target those things and build those things. I'm thinking about those knuckles, where those guys attach. A lot of these remind me of like chicken bones. Let's draw that one a little bit lower. Kind of thinking about that, you can imagine sort of putting skin up over top of these things, right? Where would those knuckles be? These guys are going to be your knuckles, that, like, say, fist that you'd punch with, right? Those are going to be the contact points, and then the muscle, ligaments, and the tissue are going to kind of fit on over top of that, right? So each one of these intersection are going to be the next set of knuckles, right? So it's always good to kind of think about that stuff. Let's move this guy down a little bit. I'm running out of room. Always good to think about that stuff, so that you're not just kind of drawing symbols for human body parts, right? You're actually kind of understanding how these things work, and able to know if these things are a little bit too long or too short, for instance, right? So for instance, I'd say that the pinky setup over here is maybe a bit far over, right? Maybe make that a little bit smaller. Kind of bend that into the middle of the hand. Something like that, right? Good practice in there. Check out CD Spectrum blog. I'll give you a lot of insights where you understand the pipeline of games, movies, and design. It'll help you with all you want to do. Absolutely. Cursed treasure and pirate theme in a cave. Yeah, it's like the Goonies. Are those the types of books that I read? Which types of books are you talking about? Oh, the Andrew Loomis. For art, yeah. I'm interested in lots of different anything that can help. Why not, right? Learn from other artists. It's a good idea, right? make a copy of that, just so that we can kind of play with that now, right? Like grab my smudge brush. Let's see what kind of brush we can get in here. Smudge. Actually, I'm just gonna go back to a regular brush, and I can kind of start kind of knocking out some of that interior detail, so we can kind of see what our hand looks like a little bit in here. All those bones. See how we feel about them. Not too bad. All right, let's start to kind of detect where the I guess I would call them landmark kind of shapes, right? That's sort of the ligament that'll pop up over the knuckle there. Similarly here, right? So the ligament loops over top to be able to pull our fingers back. So that's where you get the kind of peak of the top of the knuckle there. And next set of knuckles, same thing, right? In there. Then our last knuckle, fingertip. So, feeling too bad. Not feeling too bad at all. Making room for the flesh that has to kind of hang out around there. Anything like nails or anything like that, right? So that's all just kind of like looking at the bone structure. So I think as long in a very general sense, as long as you kind of get the foundation of those things down, you can, with the hand, I mean, knowing where the muscles are is a good idea. If you were hacking it together, you just make room for some more mass, and then you can kind of judge whether or not it looks too thin or too emaciated or too fat, that kind of thing. Kind of just fiddle with it till it looks good for maybe whatever it is you're designing, because there's plenty of different kinds of hands, right? See, like some people have very, very fine hands without you not being able to see veins or muscles at all, just kind of feel very sleek, whereas some people have sort of like sausage fingers, right? So it's different kind of massing in there. Time Bandits, Terry Gilliam, good film. Classic. That always reminds me of Baron and Munchausen as well. Yeah, interesting in there. So there's our hand, getting some of that in. Let's try and take a look at the back of the neck where it connects to the skull. That's always a good one. Oops, start a new layer in there. Let's make that a little bit smaller. Kind of got the spinal cord coming out of the back of the head there. Sort of like just an armored cable, right? Protect the old spinal cord. Definitely makes sense that when people get into like crazy accidents and become paralyzed, that it's how kind of precarious sometimes it is, that your kind of ability to send nerve impulses is just protected by this cage. Alright, so how many we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we got that 7 to the 7th cervical. That's our big boy at the base there. It's almost like this blocky channel that comes to the outside of the neck there. Kind of sweeps around this way. And these kind of little protrusions. I'm sure they all have very interesting names. Crowding this one. Let's get that out of the way. We'll just erase that stuff. Inside of the mouth even. See the teeth. Of course that would be the back side of the jaw. It's pretty kind of, it's very soft back here, so it's very difficult to draw without some more extreme lighting. Rendering is okay, but drawing is, you know, you're putting lines in there to indicate kind of those breaks, right? So it can be a little bit difficult to see sometimes. Looking for just little overlaps where I can indicate some depth to some of these shapes. Start getting the ribs coming off of the spine there. Sort of almost creating these little Y shapes in there. I don't know why I'd call them Y shapes, but that's what I'm seeing anyway. There's some value in behind those elements to indicate some shadow over there. A movie called Cannibal Holocaust. Director's cut. Nope, not seen it. 80s horror music. Yeah, I don't mind it myself. Sci-fi, 70s, 80s sci-fi is pretty amazing. Sleepaway Camp. Nah, I haven't seen that. I know exactly what the cover of that looks like. I always looked at it in the video store. Back when there was VHS, when we would go and rent on VHS. It was some tapes, and then you'd get home and it wasn't rewound, or you'd the tape was all screwed up, and you'd have to take it back. Definitely on demand is a lot better, a lot better living than what it used to be. I kind of miss it though, that nostalgia for that time. I remember being excited to get kind of like a series of something on VHS. Classic. Use a little bit of value here to pop some of this stuff out. Put our own shadow in there. Feels sort of like an India ink brush. Old horror, science fiction. Were you a boy before the internet was born? Was I a boy? I'm assuming you mean, was I a kid? Yeah, I was. I would have to wait at the public library to open to kind of get information on things. And then you'd go to the library, and then that book would be already kind of taken out, because of course you couldn't search that before. You'd have to call and see if they had it. So yes, I absolutely remember a time before the internet. But no, I'm pretty happy that that's the internet's a thing, obviously, but it's not necessarily made people smarter. That's for sure. Okay, so I mean, I've got some sketching done. I mean, how much of this would I do? It's going to be dependent on sort of what time you have to spend, doing some practical exercise stuff. Ideally, you'd want to spend a lot of time, right? But it's not always the case that you're able to do that kind of thing. So, I mean, for me, we've spent about 50 minutes doing that kind of thing, just kind of getting a vibe, loosening up as well. When we were looking at life drawing before in previous streams, we would spend time just loosening up, getting used to drawing, and then also not having it be super essential that every stroke that you're making or every drawing that you're making is the most amazing piece of artwork you've ever made. Takes the pressure off a little bit. You can loosen up and relax into it. So we've done that. Feeling good. Okay, I'm just gonna look at my brush settings here. We do have a shape dynamic on that brush, but I might pinch that, see what we've got in terms of a stroke. Doesn't feel too bad. He's a little bit big for my liking, but I might be able to make that work. Miss Artsy. Good books on anatomy. Take care, Nate. Loomis, not Loomis is his name is spelled like this. Andrew Loomis, and he makes some. They're kind of classic books. I mean, there are other life drawing instructors and other artists out there that have criticisms, but everybody does. Everybody has criticisms of everything. Loomis is good. There is trying to remember the name of it. It's a Japanese book, but it's not going to be too useful to tell you guys because you can't buy it here. But Loomis is a good one. Bridgman's drawing. What else we got? It's my bookcase full of stuff back there. I mean, for my money, the Loomis stuff kind of lays things out very well and simply in a lot of cases. You get into let me just Google the name of it here. My brain, I'm drawing a blank. It's Monday. Cut me some slack. Let's take a look at yeah, you've got Artistic Anatomy is a good book. Classic Human Anatomy by Valerie, what's her name? Valerie Winslow. Those are books that I have. So Artistic Anatomy, Classic Human Anatomy, any of the books by Andrew Loomis are a good start. My favorite book for functional anatomy is actually called Anatomy for Sculptors by Oldis, I think his name is. You can still buy that book for sculptors. And that one's nice because I'll just throw up the link in the chat here. That's a really good book because for Anatomy for Sculptors is for people that want to make things in the round, right? So actual volumes. And so you're going to learn not how to kind of create symbols like, you know, how to draw an owl, draw a circle, draw another oval, and this and that, right? And then, you know, the rest of the owl. It's less like that and more kind of like, these are the volumes, these are the forms, this is how it deforms, this is how it moves. So it's a really good book in there. I would say if you have the cash, I would get a lot of them, right? And all of those things are really handy. I have the écorchés from 3D Total as well. So it's the human figure. Obviously male, you can get a male and female, and half of it is écorché, which is the kind of skin taken off the muscle, and then half of it's with skin. So food for thought there. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah, so hopefully that helps your search. Okay, so we're gonna think about maybe just a fun little sketch where we have a skeleton. Maybe I mean, you see this all the time in fantasy games. Be like, you enter a cave and you find that there's maybe somebody that's been stranded, or there's a sword through their rib cage kind of thing to indicate they had fallen at some point in a battle. So lots of fun different things we could do there. You could even do like sort of in the kind of what's the name of that film? Sort of I suppose any sort of fantasy game or film, there's always like skeleton bad guys, right? These kind of zombie skeleton things that come out of the ground. You know, that could be pretty fun, right? Where you're kind of thinking about that body coming up, maybe out of the ground or coming at you with a sword. So we could imagine kind of just drawing the basic shapes. So kind of getting the sorting out maybe what the volume would look like before I get into any of this, the more specific details of something. So I'm thinking about the rib cage here. I'm thinking about the pelvis, just as volumes. Oh, I cannot stand this music. There we go. Skeletor, yeah, that'd be a good one. Art of Invader Zim? No, I try and stay away from art of books now. Very select few. I don't have room for them anymore. Used to be a great art bookstore that's now since closed. I used to go to. Where I'd do that thing where you go in and you kind of just read the books without buying them. Because I just didn't want to have to like physically house the books. Anyway, I'm sure it's good. Maybe I'll look at Parka blogs, see if he's reviewed it. And that's a good website as well if you are unfamiliar. Parka blogs. Parka. And he reviews art books and sort of, I think, some traditional media stuff, pens, tablets, that kind of thing. So it's a pretty good reference for you guys. We do something instead, like he's playing guitar. Why not? We can be silly with it. No one owns our time. You'll have plenty of experience having to make things for other people. Where they say, no, do it again. Let's move this guy up a little bit. So we want to be careful with as well as when you're making a skull is make sure there's plenty of room for the brain, right? It's something I see quite a bit where people don't give enough room for the actual brain box. So don't be that guy or gal. Doesn't give enough room for the thoughts. Get that rib cage down in there. Get our tibia out there and into the foot. The fibula we won't be able to see on that side. So the tibia and fibula, the lower bones of the foot, or the leg rather, the tibia is the one that connects to your knee, and that's sort of the load-bearing bone. You'll see your patella up on top of that, and then of course your femur comes on top of that. And then you got this little guy on the outside edge, which is your fibula, and that is more for kind of supporting movement in the ankle than it is for load bearing. So your main kind of tibia bone is going to be the heavy hitter there, but you'll remember, you know that this is sort of the outside of the leg because that's where the fibula lives. It's on the outside of each leg. So you just watch out for that. But yeah, it's the complexities of the human leg. So it's always interesting to see these skeleton warriors because it's like the only reason that a skeleton can be held together is because of ligaments and muscles, right? And when these skeletons are completely devoid of any of this connective tissue, I mean, it's magic, obviously, that it's alive or running around, but it doesn't make much sense. So But I think we can suspend disbelief on a lot of these things in our lives. Have fun with it instead of being kind of too beholden to reality. I sound down. Am I tired? No, I'm good, thanks. You think it's better to just try and come up with your own concept art ideas, or trying to use references and copy off of someone else's? It just depends, right? I mean, copy off of somebody else's. I was just talking about this before with fan art. That doesn't allow for much in the way of you practicing design, right? And as a concept artist, that's basically what you're doing, is you're using the skill of drawing and painting to help someone visualize something. So if you've only ever ripped off other people's designs, or let's say have been heavily inspired, right, by those designs, you're going to actually struggle when it comes time to make something from your own mind, because you've never been in there, or at least you haven't spent a ton of time creatively problem solving things. So I would say, but sometimes, you maybe you are tired, or maybe you're kind of just trying to practice something specific and you don't want to take on design work, right? Maybe you're like just trying to practice rendering a certain quality of material. Then I'd say, yeah, it might be nice to just kind of do a fan service piece. And even at that point, I still say with my students, I still suggest that you are just inspired by an existing IP, right? Like Marvel, Disney, whatever it is, right? Star Wars, whatever your favorite IP is, and then fit something into that. Can save you a little bit of that design time. But then you're not just making fan art. And then certainly don't put Naughty Dog on it, or Disney on it, right? You don't need to label those things for those people, especially if there's no indication that you're doing fan art. Just a way to save yourself from it. Hopefully that makes sense. So we got a little rough of this dude. So I can always kind of just turn that down a little bit. What are we doing here? Yeah, let's just drop that opacity way down. Start a new layer. What's the difference between is there, I think what you're asking, is there sexual dimorphism in the skeleton? And yeah, there is. Of course, the female skeleton will overall be smaller. I do believe that bone density is lighter. Hips on males are obviously not built to carry any sort of pregnancy, right? Rib cage is bigger on males because it needs to fit all of the organs, which need to pump more blood. Outside of that, in terms of the skeleton, I don't think so. Not to my recollection, anyway. I mean, I've named some, so there obviously is, but outside of that, like I said, none come to mind. Doesn't mean they don't exist, though. So let's get this second pass. I am going to switch brushes, actually. This one's a little bit too broad. You need to find a little guy. I like that one, just in terms of the texture in there, but let's see if we can mess with the settings on that. Minimum, not really. Dual brush. I might end up going for something that's a little bit more simplified. I'm going to go all the way back up to the top here. Just use a clean line brush, so I can establish just some tighter lines in here. Thinking about the old cavity, ocular cavity that we were looking at before, practicing. All right. Never a bad thing to have reference up though, right? No one will really care that you're amazing and you don't need reference. It's the end product is always good, and I find it's always good to learn as you go. You know, the more you do know, the more you're likely to kind of look at different nuances of something else that you haven't paid attention to before. So you don't always need the most one-to-one reference either. You can kind of see these shapes and start to imagine the way they actually move if you need them to go in a different direction than, say, your reference has it moving. Right? You can always make those shifts yourself. Think about our clavicle that we built before, and we'll actually move our arm out more. Kiss, yeah, nice. That costal arch moving down in there, and we'll get this guy moving this way. I'm actually gonna erase that. I want it to be moving backwards a little bit more, so we're gonna be looking kind of down the barrel, so to speak. So thinking about, you know, that moving back in this direction rather than being folded out towards us. So if you ever need help with that, you know, just spend some time redrawing it, right? Because we want that spine to feel like it's kind of moving back this way. So we'd need that clavicle to drop. So we're not going to see much of the open rib cage in there, and then our floating guys are going to be kind of out of the way. So. bones in the hand, and then all the bones coming off of that. Thinking about finger pose. I'll play with that a little bit more. So I mean, just it's fresher in my mind what those bones in the hand look like, right? Because we practice that, so it's a bit easier for me to kind of achieve the look I'm after, right? Now that I've seen it recently. Think about that pelvis in there. Maybe move this pelvis out back this way. Get that strap coming in over top. Wrapping over homeboy's back here. Hey, welcome. Power cord. Do I draw at the weekends or just chill? I draw. Yeah, it's sort of something that I do every day now. Is just get up and draw. Get up, have my coffee, and draw. I mean, it's good to have that habit. Otherwise, you know, you'll replace that with something else. Sometimes you have to, right? Whatever. We all know that life requires our attention a lot of the time. So no, but I definitely make sure I make time for it. I didn't used to though. Just with things going on, as everyone knows, you can have a pretty busy life sometimes. But I found like I was kind of missing it, and I had just not made time for it. And so, you know, that's something else that I teach my students is like, just make time, whatever it is. If it's 15 minutes a day, it's better than nothing, right? So let's make time. If you find like you get distracted a lot by people, then just tell them that you need that time, so that they're not expecting to just have your attention at any time that they require, right? That can be just a good way of making sure that you still get the benefits of drawing all the time. And it's just sort of just organization as well, right? Which some people struggle with, insofar as, you know, you have to actually put that time aside, right? So yeah. Have that thumb pinching a little pick. I think it'd be fun actually to have that. I have big long strings like Tom Morello from Rage. So I mean, on a guy like this, I could decide to go in and put like torn fabric and stuff like that hanging off of him. You know, if I wanted to make him look like he's risen from the dead, I can have a little bit of hair coming off of him. Old school rocker. End up doing some illustrations for a band, maybe. Kind of really lump that over the 7 cervical vertebrae. Could do another pass at that point. Tighten things up. Hey, Gonzo. How are ya? Let's grab another layer. Frank Zappa, yeah. I love it. He's named his kids Moon Unit and Dweezil. Still my favorite things. How ridiculous. Let's give him an eye. Sort of like the thumbnail for the stream. He'll be staring straight at us. So something about the human skull and its construction. The eye always does seem like it's sort of sad in terms of the way the peak of the ocular cavity kind of moves up towards the forehead. So you see that a lot in sort of illustrations where they want to make the skulls or the skeletons look hardcore. So instead that ridge of bone will kind of look like, you know, pursed eyebrows or furrowed brows. We could always do that if we want. We can do whatever we want. That's sort of the theme of what I want the theme of these Mondays to be, is kind of just really relaxed kind of drawing, right? No heavy sense of like, I've got to complete this thing. Because the drawing shouldn't always be about that, personally, I think, because it can really be a drag sometimes. I say this coming from being in the industry for too long now, where you're always having people criticize your stuff, right? And that's part of the job. You know, like, you're a service at that point. But your art, your personal art, has to be there as well. So just making sure that you service your own love for it, right? Where you're not always building stuff for other people. And that's why sort of the drawing in the morning for me is great, isn't that I only have to make me happy, which is a nice contrast anyway. Sometimes the way the name color on these on the stream chat, it's so hard to read. If you gave a skeleton long hair, it would look like guitarist Steve Vai. The eye popping out because of the audio. It could be hanging from the optic nerve. Wonder which one I would do that to. Maybe we could do that here. Could kind of be sailing out of the socket that way. Oh, good. That's good to hear, Gonzo. We're gonna give that guy a little angry brow ridge. Why not? I didn't check that out. You can hit me up on Slack though for that kind of stuff. We won't put that stuff in the stream. All right. Serpent tongue, I'd have to connect it to something. That's the problem, right? I could just be coming from nowhere, but then, you know, I'd be cheating that. So it could be disembodied. I kind of do like seeing the other side of his jaw though, so I think I'm gonna keep it for now. Could be that that's maybe he's bitten it off. It's just floating. Gonna move that iris down. Let's give him a goat eye. Or goat iris. Great t-shirt design. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can make tons of money off of selling that kind of thing, right? So, well, I don't know about tons of money. You make money. The whole threadless era of t-shirts. I don't know if people still buy threadless shirts. It's definitely a thing. At a point there. Yeah, if I were making this a t-shirt design, I would endeavor to do something like just follow the outside edge with a bit of a thicker line weight in here, right? Just so that it stands out really well. And that's the other cool thing about being an illustrator or being a concept artist, is that you don't have to only ever do concept art. And this is a big thing in industry, right? Where, say you're somebody that works in a specific discipline that's very kind of specific to, say, video games or film, right? Some of those jobs just don't translate well to other industries. Like you could probably just be designing logos for business cards or brands. You do kind of start stepping on graphic designers a bit there, but illustration wise, you know, that stuff is definitely something we can do. So lots of ability. Everybody needs art. Even in these uncertain times, people ask other people for artwork. All the time. Do you wear band t-shirts? Not so much anymore. I kind of, the older I get, the less I want stuff on my t-shirts. The band t-shirts that I still have are Baroness. Baroness, I love Baroness. Put onto that by a good friend of mine. But yeah, they're a fantastic band. I had a shirt from, I went to a Combi Christ show, and I left it in with a friend, and it took me months to get it, and I drove a car share home and forgot it in the car. Oh well. But yeah, I don't wear too many of them in that regard. Start to kind of fill that stuff in there. Sort of like this pen and ink vibe, which I really enjoy when designing things. You also notice in some illustrations, say like with skeletons and that kind of thing, people just generalize a lot of the skeleton. I mean, most people aren't that aware of the intricacies of where parts connect, how many parts there are necessarily. As long as you kind of get a general vibe, you can get away with a lot. So, but as designers, you do want to kind of have a sense of how things work, so you're not making it up as you go along. I used to go get shirts from this store called Upper Playground a lot. I really loved their designs. They'd have some interesting artists featured. Go check them out. I believe they're from San Francisco. I could be wrong though. Picked up a concepting job even though everything else is going to heck. Oh, good for you. Yeah, I mean it's not easy to do anyway because it's a very sought after job, but you know, there's still a lot of people that need help with things, and you know, it's just something you got to work at. You know, I worked as a QA tester for a couple years before I even got a chance to be a junior. And even then, you know, if I wasn't in the right place at the right time, I wouldn't necessarily have got that opportunity, right? So it's, you know, the expectations have to be that it sometimes takes a while. Even if you're somebody that's experienced in the industry, right? It can be sometimes that your style doesn't fit, or you just, you know, ships passing in the night, you miss an opportunity that you weren't aware of, right? So it can sometimes be a little bit of a bummer that way. I always kind of want to vibe towards putting at least some skin on. Just for whatever reason I don't dig it when there's not some connective tissue, because I really love like the twist in the wrist here being something where we maybe see that skin twist around. So I'll put it on if I want to. There we go. He's just sort of like this rotten boy. German heavy metal. Rammstein? Yeah. I think that's what you mean. Rammstein. It could be Rammstein. I don't know. But, yeah. He might have a bandana tied around his wrist like Mick Jagger or Axl Rose. There's the pick. Some flesh hanging off him there. Yeah, it'd be nice if, as far as I know, you can't play your own music on Twitch, which really sucks. Because I do prefer to, if I'm listening to music while I play, or while I play guitar, while I sketch, you know, it's a very specific kind of music. Otherwise, I can get distracted pretty fast and start meandering in my thoughts. I don't think you can, though. Doing that classic thing, running out of room on the canvas. What you want to do, make sure you're doing if that happens, is don't start compressing your drawing because you ran out of room. That's the worst thing you can do. Make a clear overlap here. Some width to that neck, the fretboard. Yeah, it could be like hanging off the strings. That'd be cool. I am not going to draw all these frets. Just kind of indicate them enough anyway. Have a pickup right there. I'll have another one down here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Some damage on there, some contour, which helps us read it. When I'm putting damage on there, I want to make sure I can leave some visual space to be able to read whatever as I'm working with. Might actually move these guys down a little bit. Of course, these strings aren't going over any of those pickups. Whatever, I can just erase it. Now there's only 5 pickups. We'll cheat it in there. It's still a sketch. If I had a client that was really kind of pedantic about that stuff, obviously I'd spend the time. But we're about to wrap this up anyway, so I would say that you know, the core of what we were talking about today was, you know, having a plan for this to end up in some sort of piece of artwork for yourself, right? So try that out. Try and practice with the idea that you're going to actually build something later, so you do get into the habit of actually practicing right? As we mentioned, it can be something that can be a bit boring sometimes if it's just about general practice, right? So we saw today like how I went through and familiarized myself with some of these structures so that by the time I did come in and work with it, I was more familiar. And you can imagine over time that becomes a lot more useful to you, right, as you build more work. So there we go. We've got start to a t-shirt design maybe by looking at the skeleton. So you can imagine maybe doing something with muscle. I don't know. Maybe that might be some like creature that has exposed muscle or something to that effect. And then of course with human skin, it can be many different things, character designs and whatnot. So have a play, see what you can do with it, and then, you know, build that healthy sort of way of working, way of practicing, and you'll definitely notice the old artwork gets better as you go. Okay, so thanks everybody. It's a fun session. I'll be back on Thursday with some concept art stuff, so keep an eye out for that. There'll be Eric will be streaming on Friday as well, Eastern time. I think it would be 4 p.m. Eastern. You can check the schedule for that. But otherwise, have fun out there, keep practicing, and we will see you next time. Take care, gang.